Let's take a read and I'll answer any questions on these. I want to make sure you're comfortable with what we're calling learning strategies. It's how the brain learns. They're all valid. We can differentiate by learning strategy, meaning I can take a learning target and I could offer 3 or 4 different ways. Well, schools who've been doing this for 3 or 4 years, right? I'll show you an algebra one where they have 5 of these there. And what's funny is children will start to get upset at you. You'll have children who'll say, Miss, you don't have my favorite one there. You don't have the one with the video, right? And they get upset at you. And you go, that's okay. You can make your own, but also, right? I want you to practice other learning strategies. There's other things that are important for us to learn about learning and to think about our process. Otherwise, we tell children, well, you should persist. But did we teach them how to persist? Did we give them legitimate strategies on how to persist? So that's what you see here, right? Or what happens when we tell kids to keep working at it? But you ever notice if you work really hard at something, you start to actually have lower quality, right? And you need to walk away from it. You need to step away, take a break, celebrate what you've done, and then come back. That's a strategy, is to figure out where you are. That's self-regulation, right? So children being fluent in learning strategies creates the ability for them to self-regulate and to think, gosh, I'm not learning this way. What's another way? Is there another way? And then to actually have an option to go for, right? And gosh, what about evaluating them? These are my favorites. These are my least favorite. These are the ones I like. These are the ones I need. I could almost picture the lesson, right? Where we teach them about these things. And so that's what the kindergarten room is like, the year 1 maybe, where we're like, okay, we have to learn this. We have 2 strategies we're going to use today. You have to pick which one, and you give them a little picture of themselves. You know, put your picture in the envelope for the strategy we're going to do. We have these 2 set up. I just want to role play with you because remember what I said on Saturday. All the kids will pick the exact same one. You know that, right? The minute one kid picks one, they're all going to go that way because that became the popular choice. And make no mistake, high schoolers are going to do the same thing. They're going to pick the one that their friends all agreed to do. Is everyone with me on that? These are not sophisticated choice making, but that's what they're going to do. And it's our then opportunity to not say, oh, I need at least half of you to pick the other one. I just killed legitimate choice. Anna's sitting here trying to teach these kids they have legitimate choice. They don't believe us at first. And if we say out loud, oh, I need half of you to pick something. This is what Christina was telling us before. She said, with those words, you just destroyed self-navigation. You shifted the kids from, oh, I actually have to take ownership of my learning to, oh, I have to follow the directions of my teacher. See the difference? There it was. It was that one moment of instruction. Our words will make or break this. So when we say we're doing a self-navigation lesson, actually, that's what we're doing. We are now teaching the kids how to be self-navigating, and we have to be okay with the messiness of them making poor choices and them doing all those things we could have predicted. And then as soon as a child is unhappy over by one option, you go, we can coach them. We can say, you know, Colin, you look upset. Well, there's no space for me, or I'm not getting a turn. And you go, okay, well, you can make another choice. Right? Because the whole point of this lesson is to teach them that they make a choice, they commit to that choice, and then they are in control of their learning. And I have to make sure that my language and my classroom is set up to get them ready for that. And I have to talk about it that way. So then as soon as little Colin goes over and does the other learning strategy, remember I'm talking about a 5-year-old. All the other little 5-year-olds are going to come flying over and they're now going to do that one. And it's a total mess again. And the teacher has to be okay with that. She can't say, no, you have to stay over there. No, time out. This is where the teacher had to let go. And by the way, it's mass chaos. Everyone with me on this? This is messy. And the learning target I was going for during this time is not actually happening. Everyone with me on that? Because it's more about self-navigation in that moment than it is about the actual learning target. And I had to be ready for that in years 1 and 2. So those teachers, though, that they wrestle with that, they are creating the brain development for a self-navigating learner, which means by the time we get to year 1 and then year 2 and then year 3, the kids are like, oh yeah, this is the self-navigation thing. I have to choose, I have to pick one. And even maybe 2 weeks into the unit, let's say we do a new assessment, we try something and some children have not shown improvement. It's not time for me to say, now I need you to do this other learning strategy, right? I got to back it up and I got to go, well, let's look at your data. Have you shown improvement? Do you think it's time for you to choose a different learning strategy? Would you like me to help you come up with a new one, perhaps, if these aren't working? You hear your language? Oh my gosh. It's all about teaching them about learning strategies, not assignments, not assessments, not accountability that way. You're modeling for them how to hold themselves accountable to growth. You haven't moved a number up. Let's pick one. Let's make a commitment to move one up in the next 3 days. And what learning, maybe that learning strategy with talking to your friends isn't the one that's working, right? Let's pick one, maybe that's in a different format. So you're teaching them about that self-regulation. This takes time. This takes talking. This is the big lift to get kids to self-navigating kids. But if we spend that time in the younger years, I guarantee you my middle schoolers and my high schoolers will never go back. Meaning if they have a teacher who refuses to let them self-navigate, remember all that pace that they were talking about, Anna? They'll sit there and go, why aren't you letting me do this? Are you kidding? You're going to make me stay and sit here and walk through all of these with no control for my own learning? There'll be a small riot, right? So once you teach kids how to be self-navigating learners, they don't like going back. So that's why we want to talk about this as a faculty. This is not the kind of thing where a couple of teachers can do it, get the kids ready for it, and then some teachers don't. So either we promote self-navigation and we think about what that's going to mean for our learners, or we really have to be careful. Other things that you'll see them do. They will critique us on our learning strategies that we create. They go, oh, I could make much better slides than that. Those weren't clear enough. And Anna, correct me if I'm wrong. Will kids say, I'm going to make my own slides, right? So they will look at these and they'll say, I'm going to go and I'm going to make this. In fact, Miss, I can make a better video than that. And they will help us. And we look forward to those moments. But what they're really saying is, I'm going to teach myself. I know how to organize these pieces and I know what I need to learn. And that's the goal. That's the knock it out of the park. So I do want to open up to any questions or observations. What do you like about these learning strategies? Did you see any that that stood out to you? Or are there any questions? Do you see any that don't feel clear? Maybe you want an example. I'd like to open up the floor to that.
Marie, Shelley, just sort of thinking, starting off, and you'd suggested sort of taking 2 learning strategies for a self-navigation day. Is it more of an inquiry approach that they experience it on that day, or do we explicitly teach those 2 learning strategies prior to the self-navigation? Do you know what I mean?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. I'm going to say I've seen both work. So give me an age group here.
I teach year 6.
Year 6.
10,
I might go. I think I would go total inquiry approach with that group. Yeah. They love that, right? So you come in and you go, hey, we got 2 new ways to learn this, and they'll just eat it up. And but then I would give them the name of it or the number of it, a way to organize it, because they like to be in control. Yeah. They love controlling this. So then they start deciding which ones are their favorites. So I do.
So name it and number it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they're good. But let them distill out what they think is going on, right? Yeah. They love that.
Yeah.
But some kids, and also there might be some kids, though, if you have some children who, for whatever reason, are not responding well to that inquiry feeling, go ahead and give them hint cards. Have hint cards ready that explain what it is and tell them what to do. Because you really don't, constructivism, right? What we've learned about brain science is that sense of frustration that creates the opportunity for learning, right? So that's the constructivist approach, and the inquiry approach is fantastic. But when that frustration hits an apex, the brain makes a choice. This is too hard and I don't like this. They start to have an emotional reaction. That's when you do not want to push it. Give them the hint cards, walk them through it immediately, or else you're creating shutdown.
Yeah.
Right? So there's that line, and you do not want to create shutdown around learning strategies. So that would be my only, I'd be so ready with those hint cards just in case.
Okay, great, thank you.
Oh no, great question. Other observations? What do you like about these learning strategies? Do they feel approachable, good? Some topics tend to work in some learning strategies more than others, but we do get stuck in favorites. That's a teacher thing. So we get stuck in our own like 9, oh, this is how kids learn. That's how some of our kids learn, right? So it will be a stretch for us to push ourselves into getting into those other learning strategies as a natural part of our learning environment. So sometimes if I have like 6 learning targets, I'll try and spread myself out, right? I'll try and take 2 of them, and maybe I'll do the same 2 learning strategies, but a different 2, I'll pick a different 4 learning strategies, right? To try and stretch it out and make it something where I don't just have the same ones over and over and over again. I will say the first time you do it, if you always do the video, the sample text part, and a model, and you just keep using the same ones all the way through, kudos, good job. I'm going to say go with that, because to pull those materials together and to build that first one, that's how we all do it. That's how everyone's first self-navigation tool looks. But what I'm encouraging you to do is when you get stuck and you go, I can't think of a learning strategy for this one, come back to this list, go shopping. Chances are it's sitting there and it's just outside of the normal ones you tend to go to. And that'll feel good. Hi,
Marie,
Christina.
I think we're doing, at the beginning of every year, we do a building a learning community unit of coming back into the classroom. I really think that going through these bit by bit with the children, and what does it look like, and you know, how can you learn using these strategies, could be something that we could incorporate very clearly as an ongoing part of the year, but also specifically for in the beginning of the year with our building a learning community.
It's brilliant. I love it.
It also seems like they're almost under headings, aren't they? They're not organized under headings, but they are the sort of those more, there's some that are sort of more academic, like as I'm working through a concept or a skill. Then there's others that are more personal, like executive functioning type things. And then there's also that potential maybe for more about, you know, working with others. And so it could well be that, you know, like Christina's saying, that for the building a learning community, we might focus on a couple of learning strategies that are about, you know, personally, or how I work with a group type thing, you know, how we interact. And then those academic ones, and then come, but then you can always, whatever you're doing, refer back to those personal or group related functioning strategies. You see what I mean? So you've got some
For sure.
specific, and then some that you can have as your, you know, your ongoing, you know, you try and think of a learning strategy. Well, go to, remember BLC, the list up on the board. Do you remember we talked about, and we learned all about these different ones. So it's sort of, it's great. It's really good.
And Nick, I don't know if you're thinking this, but every department, right? When we think about how we're helping kids develop identity, a sense of control, a sense of they have choices that they can do to improve, that may be outside of the directions they were getting, these learning strategies are an entryway, right, into improving performance and doing exactly what Anna's talking about, which is, okay, so I've got the strategies I can use at any time, right? And I've got strategies that feel a little more, would probably be listed out by my teacher in a directive. So there might be the, hey kids, let's always remember we can walk away from these things when we know we need a mental break, or we need to really think about coming up with a plan. Let's think about our thinking before we just go in and do it, right? So those are the kinds of things we might remind students about as a strategy they should use at any time. I could see guidance going after that. I could see health going after that, phys ed going after that. All these other departments can build a lot of those pieces. But I would caution us from over grouping them. I have to tell you, we've grouped these in a lot of different ways. I could show you, I kid you not, at least 7 different charts. We even color coded some of them to try and make them group. But what it always falls apart when I start getting into different age groups or a different kind of task. And so by over sorting them, we start to have unintentional consequences. Did I say that right? I don't know if I just made up a word, but go with me on this one. The idea being that they are withholding options that might have worked perfectly well, depending on the learning target I'm dealing with and the age and of the learner. So we've ended up, the only over processing that we allowed was the habits of mind. Because I do think by putting the habits of mind on them, it strengthened it. And you'll notice that there's several habits of mind on several of them, right? So that was fascinating to us, how the brain science of learning and building retention. It also matters whether I'm initially learning something, as in I'm gaining content knowledge or a basic skill, versus a strategic thinking or extended thinking on something. And so some students, when they're trying to learn something initially, maybe it's only certain learning strategies. But when I'm trying to develop maybe a more rigorous thought around something or a generative thought around something, I end up having to use other learning strategies. So that's also something to think about, that the type of thinking is what's going on here. Does that help? Some people would say, oh, Marie, how do you teach critical thinking? Or how do we get to that spot? And you go, well, just shift learning strategy at some points. And that's actually where you're going for. But hands down, in terms of the executive functioning, I always think about the one about celebrations. Is anyone looking at the one on celebrations? Like I celebrate or I walk away from it and rest, right? Those two. I'm with you, Anna. I'm like, those feel like executive functioning ones. But research shows us more and more that the emotional connection to building long-term memory cannot be stressed enough. So when I get to that, how do you feel about this? If the child goes, look, I'm really tired. I'm actually really tired of practicing this. I'm getting frustrated. For a child to say that out loud and to understand that that's where they are in terms of it is a learning strategy. You go, well, what are you going to do about it? Well, I think I'm going to go practice something else for a little while, and then I'll come back to this. Brilliance and wisdom all captured in one little learning strategy, right? Or I'm going to celebrate what I know. For a child to go, I'm going to go look at what I am good at. I know what I need to practice. I know what I need to learn, but I'm going to practice one of the ones I'm good at because I need to celebrate right now. Can you imagine the metacognition that's going on in a child who can tell you that they're going to develop their sense of expertise? I dare you to look up James Paul Gee from Arizona State University in the Extended Cycle of Expertise, James Paul Gee, G-E-E. And the extended cycle of expertise, that child is spot on, that actually by spending some time working on some of the learning targets they know well, it actually will take them less time to learn the ones they don't know well than if they just keep going after new learning over and over and over again, right? If we keep moving on to more difficult material too quickly on kids, you actually fatigue the brain, and it takes you longer to teach simple learning targets. So by the end of the year, you think they just don't want to pay attention anymore, but the fact is they've hit brain fatigue. And so what used to take 3 days to teach them now takes 9. And you sit there going, oh, it must be spring break. And you're like, no, actually, or the new year, right? What it is you've hit brain fatigue, and you should let them work on the learning targets they know well. Let them do that for a little longer than you think. When you're almost bored to tears, they might actually have learned it. You with me on that? And then you give them 6 new learning targets and they'll learn them very quickly. So these are the techniques. These are actually learning strategies and what we've learned about the brain. So honestly, don't you think we could spend a whole day just on these? We could just tear each one down and talk about what's going on in the brain that's allowing us to teach safely, efficiently, and effectively, right? And the chances are we're going to be dancing around these 16 pieces. Comments, questions, what do you like about it? I am going to put it away now and start showing you some videos of different groups who are actually doing it. But thoughts?
Marie, would you try to introduce all 16 targets to like the younger years, or are some of the targets better suited for the younger years and some you might sort of save up and introduce further up the primary?
Brilliant. That's, let me think about that. I would never introduce all 16 at once to the younger years. I think what I would do is kind of work my way through them throughout the year so that over the course of the year, they've gotten a taste of all 16. I think I could do that, but I'd like to spend time maybe on 2 at a time, right? Here's 2 ways we could do it. And then maybe a couple of weeks later, oh, here's 2 ways we could do it. And I just maybe I give them a picture for each one, like an image or an icon, or even like sense of colors. I let them evaluate them. Oh, did we like that? Oh, did we not like that? Right? Let them have a reaction to it. And I wouldn't overprocess it. I certainly wouldn't hand them all over at once. That I think would immobilize even my high schoolers, right?
Sure.
But I don't want to withhold any of them, meaning I have no research that supports that young children can't, or that it's developmentally inappropriate in any way for them to be thinking about any of these, right? However, that said, I do have evidence that some children gravitate towards certain ones and respond very well, and in effect almost ignore or don't react well to other ones until later. Meaning I would not expect mastery of these with my young ones, right? I would not sit there and drill it until I got success out of the young ones. I'm just, think of it more of exploratory, right? You want them to experience it. I would seek an emotional reaction, but not necessarily, remember with my year 6s, I said, name it, right? I don't even think I'd push to naming it, right? I would let them just sort of experience them. But I would want all 16, with even children as little as 4 years old and 5 years old, just letting them learn that way, because the brain is like a muscle, right? The brain is a muscle. And if you get blood flowing to that part of the muscle, right, you're building dendrites. If we don't get blood going to that part of the muscle, dendrites get pruned. And it gets pruned very early. And so it'll take more effort for later years to try and teach that way of learning or that way of thinking if we didn't expose it. But let's play with it. I mean, if we can find one that we think is just developmentally inappropriate, I would wonder if maybe I should word it better than on this list. I worded it on this list for educators, even though I tried to make it student facing. And so I may have worded it in a way that holds it at too high an age. I would try to rewrite it maybe a little bit to make sure I was getting the same kind of learning strategy for a younger child.
It's that metacognition one, the thinking about your thinking. I mean, even when I was in year 6, I couldn't work out how to demonstrate that. I think some of them are more ambiguous than others, and for it to be very clear.
I'm with you.
Yeah. I just
so
think
I'll show you how they did it with the 5-year-olds. Okay. So we got our whole little crew of 5-year-olds, and the teacher goes, okay, because the teacher has just put a choice up. All right. So the kids know they have to make a choice. And to them, that means they're taking their picture of themselves and putting it in the envelope that represents the choice. Everyone with me on that? And we all know what's about to happen. They're just going to make random choices. But here's the teacher stops and goes, so let's think. She points to her head. She goes, let's think about our thinking. She also makes them sit upright. She's like, let's sit up. Why do we do that? Get the blood to our brains. The kids know. So you teach them a little bit about the brains, right? So we sit upright, take a deep breath, and we're going to think about our choice. Let's think about our choice first. So you're modeling for them the behavior of the think about my thinking. I don't make the kids say, I'm thinking about my thinking, although it's really neat if you could get them to say that. But you're just modeling that pause. We're going to think about which choice we want to make. Now we're going to know which choice we're going to make. And now we're going to stand up and do it. And so we're just almost like a think aloud, right? We're modeling a think aloud of the thinking. That's pretty much what it looks like at grade 5, right? But they experienced it. And that's what I'm trying to mean about experiencing it. We're going to have to walk them through it. Hands down, ladies and gentlemen, this part is teacher driven. It is your instruction. But make no mistake, I guarantee you, you're going to have to do that with your high school students too. Not quite as, expressively as I'm saying it, but we will have to coach high schoolers how to think about their thinking if they haven't been doing it for the last 9 years, right? So many of them have been doing it, but many of them have not. And so this is going to start revealing that. And so we're going to have to walk them through it, because the brain, right, had no muscles going, no blood going to that area. So if a child has been sitting in a chair for 9 years and then suddenly you expect them to get up and run around a track, they're going to struggle. They're going to fall apart on us, right? So parts of the brain atrophy if we haven't been actively teaching them how to do it. And maybe that initial part, though, with 5-year-olds, we're just getting them to get up out of the chair. We're just getting them to toddle around. Maybe we let them walk on 3 or 4 of their limbs, right? That's fine. Don't expect them to independently go all the way through those pieces, and that might help. Honestly, I wonder if I could rewrite this. Like, what would this look like at a K through 2 versus 3 through 5, 6, 8, right? How fun would that be? All right, you just gave me my next project. See, this always happens. We're going to have to see what happens with this.
You know what I'd really like to do with this? Because, I'd really like to take these and just have, take 1 or 2 of them even, and just look at that idea of, like, as a faculty, sort of say, okay, well, how could this look in the different year groups? Or, how would you scale it up for different levels of skill? Or what would be the teachers' questions that they could ask to prompt this learning strategy, just to have that big discussion? Because as I'm thinking about it, and as you're giving that example with the little ones, it's not that you're expecting everybody to do this full thing in how we perceive it as an adult. And yeah, I think that would be a great conversation to have as a faculty.
But that fluency in learning strategy is what launches self-navigation in the classroom. It's you and I being fluent in learning strategies and how to teach them and how to wrap materials around them so the kids can do them independently, meaning it's not an assignment. I can't say this enough. And by the way, the first time we do this, everyone's going to do assignments. You with me on that? And it's okay. I want you to be super patient with yourself. Teachers have been thinking about assignments for your entire career. And so for the first time, I'm saying, hey, it's not an assignment. It's something the kid can do without you. And you're like, what? Right? So, but I encourage you to show your learning strategies to your colleagues so that they can tell you it's an assignment. Is everyone okay with that? Like, find a buddy. Find a buddy that you're like, I want you to be the one to tell me that all of my learning strategies are assignments. And then have that like circle of trust. Because we're going to make all of them assignments. And then we're going to sit there and go, oh man, I knew I shouldn't have done that. And we're going to have to rewrite them as learning strategies again. So to be clear, a learning strategy is something the child can do all by themselves without you reminding them, reading them the directions, or giving them feedback on their work. Which means if they're going in the wrong direction and making a mistake, there's a model right in front of them of exactly how it's supposed to look. Maybe a video, not necessarily of you teaching it to them, although those are fine, but maybe a video of a student doing the task so that they can watch someone else doing it, and then they can look at someone else's thinking and then model their own thinking after it. See, that's a learning strategy. And how many videos of kids successfully going through the process do we offer the kids to watch? This is exactly what it's going to look like when you're doing it. And maybe the child in the video is doing a think aloud, right? They're expressing their thinking. That's a learning strategy, which is different from a teacher's mini lesson. Now, a mini lesson is fantastic. I love that as the first round. But you and I can really knock this out of the park and make sure the child has something that they can follow to make sure they're not making a mistake when they're doing it all by themselves. So if I'm doing the sound system, early language development, we had a teacher, Trish Martin. She put lipstick on and she made the sounds. And then there were cards held up and the kids had the cards and they could just keep replaying that sound over and over and over again till they got those pieces right? And so we sit there and we think about, how would I teach this to myself? How would I do that? And then you're going to be in the right headspace to set up a self-navigation tool. It's not, how will I teach this to the kids? It's, how would a child teach this to themselves? That's the attitude we want to be in. And please, please, please be extra patient with yourselves as you practice this, because constantly we have to revisit that and shift it from a collection of assignments and activities to these actual learning strategies. Honestly, it takes years for us to do that consistently, but we got to help each other, right? So I'm not kidding about the buddies, like team up.